Welcome to our discussion of Matzah, the bread of modesty. If we ask ourselves a question before we get to what is Matzah, what is Chametz? Because really, Chametz and Matzah, the leavened bread, the unleavened, they're related. In fact, until we establish that you're not allowed to eat Chametz, leavened bread, the idea of Matzah doesn't really make any sense, doesn't work. So they always go together. At the time when the Chametz prohibition comes into play, the Matzah obligation comes into play as well. So let's understand, what is Chametz? Why the war on Chametz? My father of blessed memory used to call it the war on Chametz. Why such a terrible war? We can't even own it. We can't benefit from it. You have to destroy it. You have to annul it. You have to sell it. We have to burn it. We do so many things with it. Why the war on Chametz? So in another webcast, in another discussion, we can discuss the idea of it's linked to idolatry. So many similarities, right? You have the lo yidbak b'cha mu'min acher. When it comes to anything that's related to idolatry, you don't want to have one iota of it left. We totally destroy the cities that are swept with idolatry. We burn it to the ground in ancient times in biblical Israel. So there's the idea of burning idolatry. Similarly, we burn the chametz. You don't want to have anything left of your idolatry. You don't want to have anything left of your chametz. What is idolatry? Idolatry, as Rav Amital of blessed memory explained to me, to our class, idolatry is omer la'etz tovu. You turn to a piece of wood that you made, and you bow to it. That's what we do in Western civilization. We invent something and then we say, "Oh, isn't that wonderful what I created?" And we bow to it. So that's avodah. We take our phones, right? We say, "Oh, the phone! Oh, the holy phone! So it's amazing. So amazing." We bow to the work of our own hands. That's idolatry. So what is that? That's the opposite of modesty. Matzah is the opposite of chametz. Chametz is idolatry. Idolatry is worshiping your own work. Matzah is the opposite of chametz. So matzah is humility. Yes, I can do a lot of stuff. I'm a human being. I have great endowments, but I have modesty. Egypt is the ultimate in haughtiness. Why? As it says in, I believe it's Isaiah, Li ori v'ani asitini. The Nile is mine and I made it. Pharaoh feels as if it's his Nile. He made it, he created it. And in other words, tremendous haughtiness. He thinks he's some sort of god. And the plagues in Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, is to get out of Egypt, the epitome of haughtiness, and we need to establish a greater sense of humility. The whole idea of avdus, of enslaving the Jewish people, is also connected to thinking that somehow you are greater than he is. You are the master of the other one. God says, no. Avadayim, the only master is God, and we are servants of his. We are not servants of another human being, of a Pharaoh. So the whole idea of getting out of slavery is also the notion of modesty. That's why we have the flat bread. Bread, of course, is really the same as matzah. Same ingredients, water and flour. But one rose, so it looks all puffed up. It looks like it's so big. But actually, it's the same thing as the flat bread. It's the same thing. It just looks better. And it's the falsehood of looks. It's the falsehood of externalities. It's the falsehood of haughtiness. And the matzah is more humble. It sticks to what it is. Why do we have to eat more? After all, we're trying to accomplish remembering that we went out of Egypt. So why do we have to eat the maror, which reminds us of the slavery and the bitterness of slavery? Because even as we achieve independence and wealth and all that, we want to remember the bitterness of the olden days, not to be haughty. Pentochal v'savata, the Torah says over and again in Deuteronomy, lest you eat and become haughty. V'ram levavecha, your heart gets full of itself. We want to remember the merirut, the bitterness, even as we become more successful. We want to remember the bitterness of slavery. We want to keep ourselves humble. Remember where we came from. V'zacharta ki eved hayita. Shabbos commemorates this, but so does Pesach. The notion that don't forget that you were a slave in Egypt. Don't be haughty. Another idea of Pesach is Ataber Chartanu Mikol Amim. We say a prayer, Ataber Chartanu Mikol Amim, you chose us from all nations. That's Pesach, when God chose us and took us out of Egypt. Ahavta Otanu, you loved us when you gave us the Torah. That's Shavuos. Ratzita Banu, you really love us in a special way. You accepted us when you accept our sukkah and you showed us how much you loved us with the clouds of glory. So Pesach is very much Ataber Chartanu. It's a holiday of you chose us. Oh, it's the holiday of you chose us. That could lead to haughtiness. A Jew could say, oh, I'm better than the Gentiles because God chose us. Wait a second. You have to have hanava. Even in the midst of the holiday that celebrates the chosenness, we have humility of the matzah, which is flat. When we say that you can't even have a crumb, even have a mashu, even the smallest amount of chametz cannot be consumed, cannot be eaten, if it represents haughtiness, what we're saying is that not even a small amount of haughtiness can be had. Now, the truth is that in general we say you could, Talmud Chacham, if you're a scholar, you could have a shmini shebishminis. You could have 1/8 of an eighth, 1/64 of haughtiness. Why? Because you have to have some self-esteem. You have to have some, in order to accomplish things and to do things, you need to have a little bit of. So there's a little bit. So during the year we allow chametz. Chametz is not a prohibited food. We don't say you're not allowed to have bread all year round. No, during the year we could have bread. On Pesach, though, is the time to remember. The Rambam says that when it comes to modesty, that Levita says in Pirkei Avos, "Ma'od ma'od havishval ruach." You need to be an extremist when it comes to haughtiness. You should be very, very modest. Nowhere else does it say very. When it comes to Moses, he was very modest. In Pirkei Avos, Levitas, ma'od ma'od, be particularly modest. Why? Because in general, we should be like Pesach. We should be extreme. There's no room for any chametz at all, any haughtiness. But during the year, we allow some because, after all, that's the nature of the world. You have to have a little bit of gumption in order to achieve anything. The idea is to have balance. Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadi Chesam Aleph 98a, says, Ein ben David ba, the son of David, Mashiach, will not come, ad sheyichlu gasi ruach misrael, until all the haughty people in Israel will be done, will be finished with, will be gone. What does that mean? As one commentator says, Yesod legeula. One of the foundations for redemption is being modest. In other words, the same ataber chartanu that God chose us. So we say, oh, God chose us, we're haughty. No. Eat the matzah. The very day where you're chosen, eat the matzah. Remember, you're to be modest. So too, if we want to be redeemed in the end of days, when we're redeemed, all the nations of the world will say, wow, look at the Jews. They're going to be, above all the nations. That could lead to haughtiness. So we say the fundamental yesod, the fundamental principle that needs to predate the redemption is modesty. First we eat the matzah, we have modesty, and from a place of modesty, God can dare to redeem us, unless we think that, oh, God redeemed us, He chose us again, He loves us again. Now we're haughty, now we're gonna fall in the pitfall of haughtiness again. No, says the Torah. You want to be redeemed again? Remember the matzah. Remember to be humble. When you have humility, then you deserve to be lifted up. And when you're lifted, you'll remember where you came from. Zachartaki Yevad You'll remember that you were a slave. You remember the maror. You remember the bitterness. You remember the matzah, the humility. And when we do that, then God can redeem us without spoiling us, without ram levavecha, without giving us a sense of superiority or anything like that. So we have to focus on this Pesach as we eat the matzah, on the notion of humility personally, and humility nationally. If we have that, then in Mirat Hashem, Nisan Nigalo, we redeemed once in Nisan. Nisan Hasidim Ligal, in Nisan, in this month of Pesach, we are destined to be redeemed again. But this time we're going to be ready. We're going to eat that matzah. We're going to have that humility. And we will not, we won't reach that point where God will bless us and then we'll fall in the pitfall of having haughtiness again. No, this time we'll be ready. We'll keep the modesty. We'll be redeemed and we'll keep the modesty even within the redemption. And that will lead to the Geula Shalema, the ultimate redemption. Thank you for joining us here at the Baron Hirsch Congregation, and thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer, and thanks to the Siegel family, for Erica Siegel, for sponsoring this in memory of her parents of blessed memory.